All right, let's begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa afdalu salati wa atammu taslim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ilman nafi'an wa rizqan tayyiban wa amalan mutaqabbalan. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. We continue on with the series on the rulings and etiquettes of dua. So as usual, we'll start with some review of some of the etiquettes that we covered in the previous session. Anybody want to give us one of the etiquettes we covered in the previous session? Okay, what does that mean? Good. So if the imam is making the dua, the hadith we mentioned speaks about the salah, but it can be also general. That when the imam makes the dua, then it is to be done in the plural form. He uses the plural pronouns, we, right? Forgive us, have mercy on us, grant us, so and so on, and so such and such. And if he does not do so, then Rasulullah says that he has done what to the congregation? He's been treacherous. He's betrayed the congregation. So this is a very serious charge. So anybody who is an imam making a dua, especially in the salat al-qunut and so on, then they should make sure that they do it in the plural form. All right, anything else? Good. Avoid excessive rhyming. Anybody remember the Arabic term for rhyming? Sajr. Good. Good. So avoid excessive rhyming. And we said that even though this is a prohibition, we find that Rasulullah himself did have rhymes in his du'as, in some of the du'as. So how did we reconcile between the two? Good. When it's forced or unnatural. When it's forced or unnatural, this is when it is disliked. But if it comes out naturally, a person is, naturally, they have a poetic way of speaking or words, then this is fine. And this is how Rasulullah was when he made his du'as. He did not force it, but it came out naturally like that. All right, anything else? So the question is, Rasulullah is naturally gifted with this. Yeah. So if that would apply to anybody else? Well, you try your best, right? But of course we said that Rasulullah was given, he says in hadith, أَلَا أُتِيتُ جَوَامِعُ الْكَلِمِ I was given concise, comprehensive speech. So this was a gift that he was given. So not everyone's going to be able to be like Rasulullah ﷺ. But the point is, don't force yourself to try to be rhyming and eloquent. Because the dua, the purpose is to come from the heart. Right? It's not about the words. It's more about the heart. Of course, the words matter too, but the heart is more important. All right. Any other etiquettes we covered? Yeah. Raising the hands. Up to where? Shoulder is the normal amount, right? The normal level. It should be raised. Up to the sky is in certain situations, like when Rasulullah would pray for the rain. Then he would raise it all the way up to the sky where his armpits would be shown. But the general etiquette is up to the shoulders. All right, anything else? Wiping the face. Good. And we said that there was a bit of controversy regarding wiping the face. Anybody can explain that controversy? Or why it's controversial? Ismail? Okay. Good, right. So the problem with the wiping of the face is that every hadith that mentions it is weak. Every hadith that mentions wiping of the face is a weak hadith. However, the scholars of hadith, they have differed in terms of whether these weak hadiths can come together to strengthen each other. All right. Now, sometimes if you have like a bunch of fabricated hadith, then they don't strengthen each other. They only make it more weak. Right? But there are some hadiths that the weakness is not severe to the point where if you bring them together, they can corroborate with each other and make them stronger, and it can raise to an acceptable level. So this is where the issue comes in. And we have scholars like Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar, who we quoted last week, who said that these hadith combined together, they make it into a Hasan hadith. And so therefore, if one is following that ruling, then you can act on that hadith and wipe away their face. Right, good. And we mentioned that's only for outside of the salah. Inside of the salah is very restrictive, right? Salah is very restrictive in terms of how your movements and what you do. So the wiping of the face is outside of the salah, but not inside of the salah. Yeah.
Is there an alternative to
What do you mean alternative? Right, so yeah, those who say you don't wipe away the face, it would essentially be finish your dua, just drop your hands. Yeah. Saying Ameen, right? Good. Another etiquette of dua is saying Ameen. Yeah, we mentioned that. Yeah, using the plural form. And then we had also discussed the issue about the congregational dua, the dua al-jama'i. Done, one person is making dua, the others are saying Ameen. And we said that there is evidence for this, right? In the Quran and the Sunnah, right? There is evidence for it. Now, whether that is something that should be done all the time or it's made into habit, that's a different issue. Or whether it's better to do it or not, that's a different issue. But we're talking about whether it's allowed and there's evidence for it or not. And we said that there is evidences for it, although the exact nature of when and how it should be done, that is a different issue. So we'll just mention a few of those evidences before we move on. We mentioned some of these in the previous session, and we'll mention them again. I just brought the references here for us to see. So there's in Surah Yunus, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He quotes the dua of Musa. Musa alayhi salam, he prayed against Fir'aun. O Lord, you have granted Fir'aun and his chief luxuries and riches in this worldly life, which they have abused to lead people astray from your way. Our Lord, destroy their riches and harden their hearts. فَلَا يُؤْمِنُوا حَتَّى يَرَوُا الْعَذَابَ الْأَلِيمِ. So the dua is, let them not believe, right? He made dua against Fir'aun and his people so that they will never believe. And this was the dua of Musa. In the next verse, Allah responded to both Musa and Harun. Alright, and Allah said, قَالَ قَدْ أُجِيبَتْ دَعْوَتُكُمَا. Your prayer, the two of you, has been answered. And the scholars have mentioned that what happened there was that Musa was making the dua, كَانَ مُوسَى يَدْعُو وَهَارُونَ يُؤَمِّن. And Harun was saying Ameen. So it's an example of dua being made in congregation when one person is making the dua and the other person is saying Ameen. So Musa was making the dua and Harun was saying Ameen. And Allah called it your dua, right? The two of you, your duas. So the phrase is قَدْ أُجِيبَتْ دَعْوَتُكُمَا. So be steadfast and do not follow the way of those who do not know. And we also mentioned the narration of Anas radiallahu an. Ibn Abi Dawud narrates that Anas ibn Malik, whenever he would complete the Quran, he would do a khatam of the Quran, he would gather his family and he would make dua with them together. عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه أنه كان إذا ختم القرآن جمع أهله ودعا. That Anas, when he would make khatam of the Quran, he would gather his family together and he would make a collected dua with them. We also have a very long, lengthy hadith, and this hadith is narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, who says that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah, the Exalted, has teams of angels. Inna lillahi malaika. Allah has teams of angels. Sayyahin, another hadith mentioned that they are angels that go around. They go around looking for the gatherings of dhikr. They seek out the gatherings in which Allah's name is being invoked. They sit with them and they fold their wings around each other, filling that which is between them and between the lowest heaven. When the people of the gathering depart, the angels ascend and rise up to the heaven. And mic is on? Yeah, okay. When the people depart, the angels ascend and rise up to the heaven. He, the Prophet ﷺ, said that then Allah asks them, although He is most knowing about them, from where have you come? And they will say that we have come from some servants of yours on earth. They were glorifying you, exalting you, witnessing that there was no God but you, praising you and asking favors of you. He says, and what do they ask of me? What do they ask of me? They say they ask of your paradise. So this is a gathering, right? They're gathering together and they're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So the indication here is that they're in a gathering, and one person is asking, or they're making a dua collectively, that they're all asking for paradise. What do they ask of me? They say they ask of you, your paradise. And he says, and have they seen my paradise? They say, no, O Lord. He says, and how would it be where they had to have seen my paradise? Hadith continues, then they say, and they ask protection of you. He says, from what do they ask protection of me? They say, from your hellfire. All right, so once again, these are all du'as. They're in a gathering of dhikr, and they're making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First, they're asking Allah for His paradise. Then they're asking protection from the hellfire. And then later on, the hadith mentions, then they will ask for forgiveness. Then they say, and they ask for your forgiveness. So all of these are dua, right? All of these are du'as that are being made in a gathering, right? In a gathering. So these hadiths can also be used as evidence for the permissibility of a dua done together. There's also hadith in Al-Hakim and At-Tabarani in which Rasulullah says that no people gather together and some of them make dua while others say Ameen except that Allah will answer them. Right? This hadith has there is some discussion on the authenticity of this hadith, but it is narrated in Al-Hakim and At-Tabarani that no people gather together and some of them make dua while others say Ameen except that Allah will answer them. And the hadith Qudsi, Allah, He says, I am as my slave expects me to be, and I am with him whenever he remembers me. If he remembers me inwardly, I will remember him inwardly. And if he remembers me in an assembly, in a gathering, right? And dua is part of dhikr in the gathering. وَإِن ذَكَرَنِي فِي مَلَإٍ ذَكَرْتُهُ فِي مَلَإٍ خَيْرٍ مِّنْهُمْ. If he remembers me in an assembly, right? In an assembly, then Allah says, I will remember him in a better assembly. And then we also have the hadith of Salama. She says that she was asked, what was the supplication that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ most frequently made when he was with you? So this is when they were gathered with Rasulullah ﷺ, and he would make this supplication with them together. And she said the supplication he said most frequently when he was with them together, O changer of the hearts, make my heart firm upon your religion. Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qulubana ala dinik. All right, so this is a dua that Rasulullah ﷺ used to say frequently when he was with them, when he was with the companions together. All right, now we have also some statements. Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, he says it is recommended to make dua during tawaf for whoever or whatever he wishes from the religion and worldly matters. And then Imam Shafi'i says, and if one person was to make dua and a group of people, and a group of others say Ameen, then that's fine, that's okay. وَلَوْ دَعَى وَاحِدٌ وَأَمَّنَ جَمَاعَةٌ فَحَسَنٌ. If one person, they're making tawaf and they're in a group together, and one person, he makes dua, and the others say Ameen behind them, obviously for the reason that maybe the people behind are not, they're not familiar with what du'as to make. They might not know the etiquettes of du'as. As we mentioned, there are reasons why people might not be able to make the dua on their own. And so Imam Shafi'i says this is okay, this is fine. If one person makes the dua and others say Ameen. Then we also have a statement of Ibn Taymiyyah. He says, gathering for the purpose of reciting the Quran, dhikr and dua, this is something good and recommended, as long as it is not made a permanent practice, similar to the prescribed gatherings, and there isn't any blameworthy innovation involved. So Imam Ibn Taymiyyah says this is also fine. It's okay to gather for recitation of Quran, for dhikr and for dua, as long as Imam Ibn Taymiyyah is afraid that this will become similar to a prescribed gathering, like when we gather together for Jum'ah, right? Or you gather together for the 5 salawat. These are prescribed gatherings. As long as it doesn't rise to this level, where now people are, it's resembling the prescribed gatherings, then it's okay to be done, as Imam Ibn Taymiyyah says, as long as it's not made a permanent practice. Right, so all of these are either Quranic verses, ayat, or hadith, or statements of some of the scholars to show that this idea of making the dua congregationally, it is something permissible that can be done. Of course, there are times and places where there might be some extra details on that. All right, we move on to the next etiquette. Etiquette number 24, asking Allah for all needs. All right, and it's something we have mentioned before in the beginning, that when we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it shouldn't only be for the major things. It should not only be for the big things. You only call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you need something, a big favor. Right? Sometimes you have friends, right? They won't talk to you, you won't hear from them until they need a favor, right? When they need a favor, then, they call you up and, can you do this? Can you do me a favor? Can you give me this? Can you give me that? All right? We should not be that way with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where only when we need something major, then we make dua to Him. For all our needs, right? For all our needs, even if it is something small. So do not belittle anything that you want to ask Allah for. All right? Anything that you want to ask Allah for, then ask Him for it. And on the flip side, do not view anything as too big to ask Allah for. All right? Allah is capable. Allahu ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allah has capability to do anything. He can do anything He wishes. So don't think anything is too big or grand for Allah to ask for, to ask Allah from. Now this does not mean though, just because that we believe that Allah can grant anything, it doesn't mean that you ask Allah for anything. Right? There's a difference. There's a difference between we're saying that don't view anything as too big to ask Allah for, versus saying that you can ask Allah for anything. Right? Two different things. So while anything we ask Allah for, and there's nothing too big for Him to grant, it does not mean that you just can ask Allah for anything. So so it does not mean we can ask Allah for anything. There are certain things we should not ask for, not because Allah is incapable of answering, but rather because Allah's decree overrides what is being asked. Right? So for example, you should not ask Allah to live forever. Right? Is Allah capable of making somebody live forever? Yes. Right? But Allah has decreed that everyone will die. كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ إِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ مَيِّتُونَ. Allah is addressing the Prophet ﷺ, you will die and they will all die. وَمَا جَعَلْنَا لِبَشَرٍ مِّن قَبْلِكَ الْخُلْدِ. We have not written immortality for anybody before you. So nobody is going to live forever. So this is not something you should ask Allah for. It doesn't mean that Allah is incapable. Allah is capable of granting this to whoever He wishes. But things that Allah has already decreed, then you shouldn't ask for those things. So don't view anything as too big to ask Allah for, but also bearing in mind that you shouldn't ask Allah for everything. There are certain things that fall within the permissible realm of asking, and certain things that you should not ask for, such as things that Allah has already decreed that will not happen. Right? Such as living forever, such as a person asking, oh Allah, make everybody on earth a believer. Right? Allah has already decreed that some people will be disbelievers, and some people will be destined for the fire. So these are certain things that Allah has already decreed. We shouldn't go to that level of asking for. All right. So asking Allah to live forever. Right. Avoid things like that. So we have the hadith. We mentioned this hadith before. لِيَسْأَلَ أَحَدُكُمْ رَبَّهُ حَاجَتَهُ كُلَّهَا. Let one of you ask his Lord for his every need. حَتَّى يَسْأَلَ الشَّسْعَ نَعْلِهِ إِذَا انْقَطَعَ. Even until he asks him for the strap of his sandal when it breaks. Something as simple as your sandal strap broke. Oh Allah, replace it for me. Right? Your shirt ripped. Oh Allah, give me another better shirt. Anything of that nature, even if it seems small. Anything that you have of a need, even if it's small, ask Allah for it. All right? So this includes anything small, big, major. Ask Allah for all of your needs. Let one of you ask his Lord for his every need. And this is the true level of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you reach that level where you're asking Allah for everything. It's mentioned like some of the Sahaba, things would fall on the ground. Right? They're riding a horse or a camel, and something would fall on the ground, and they wouldn't ask anybody to pick it up. Right? They would rely only on Allah to ask Allah for all their needs, to the point where they wouldn't ask any human beings for anything. Even if something fell on the ground, they wouldn't ask anybody to pick it up. So this is the highest level you can reach, where you don't ask anybody for anything, and the only person you ask is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right? But that's a very high level, and it might be difficult to reach such a level. Hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he says, when one of you makes a supplication to his Lord, one should not say, oh Allah, grant me pardon if you want, if you wish, if thou likes. But one should beg one's Lord with a will, right, strong will and full devotion, for there is nothing so great in the eye of Allah which He cannot grant. All right, any questions on this etiquette? So we will, for the questions, right, just to maintain some order, we'll ask the brothers and then also ask the sisters, so that the brothers are not dominating questions, right? So if you have a question, we'll take one from the brothers, then we'll see if the sisters have any questions, and then we'll go back and forth like that. Anybody have any questions, brothers or sisters? All right, moving on. The next etiquette is making dua with the inner palms. What does that mean? Anybody? All right, this inner part here, facing the sky. right, facing the sky. The inner part facing the sky. Right, so let the inner palms face the sky and the outer palms face the ground, like this. Right, just like when somebody is asking for, begging for money or begging for food or something. This is how they would stretch out their hands. And this is the same state you want to be when you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let the inner palms face the sky, the outer palms face the ground. Hadith of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, ask Allah with the inner parts of your palms and do not ask Him with the outer part. سَلُ اللَّهَ بِبُطُونِ أَكْفِكُمْ وَلَا تَسْأَلُوهُ بِظُهُورِهَا. Ask Allah with the inner part of your palms and do not ask Allah with the outer part. So the one who begs, right? The one who begs, this is how they ask, right? They open up their hands like this, and the inner palms are facing the sky. All right, there's an exception to this. There's an exception. And this has come in some hadith in which Rasulullah used to change the way he would position his palms in certain du'as. So the scholars have mentioned when asking to remove calamities, such as what has been narrated concerning the dua for rain. What has been narrated with the dua for rain is that Rasulullah would do the opposite. The outer palms would be facing the sky, and the inner palms would be facing the ground. So either that can mean like this, right? Instead of like this, right? Where the outer palm is facing and the sky, and the inner palm is facing the ground. Or some of the scholars say like this. But either way, the outer palm facing the sky for removing calamities, like the dua for rain against drought and so on. But the general etiquette is for the inner palm to face the sky. But the scholars have mentioned that when it comes to removing calamities, such as the dua for rain, then it's the opposite way. The outer palms will face the sky and the inner palms face the ground. All right, so either like this, right, or like this. That's specifically for dua for rain or dua for removing calamities. All right, etiquette number 26. Yeah, you have a question. Yeah. Any question? Anything mentioned about closing the palms or making a gap? I haven't seen any. Allahu a'lam. It seems okay, because I have not seen anything specific. It just mentioned he raised his hands, but it does not mention, as far as I know, whether it's connected, the hands connected, or left open. Etiquette number 26: praying before making dua. And this is more general than just praying. It's recommended to, if a person has the opportunity to do any good deed, whether it's salah, sadaqah, or any good deed in general, before making dua, right, as a means of increasing the likelihood of your dua being accepted. So if you can, pray, right, offer two rak'ah nafil prayer, or give charity, or any other good deed before making the dua, that will increase the likelihood of the dua being accepted. And we have the verse, Surah Al-Sharh, فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ وَإِلَى رَبِّكَ فَارْغَبْ. Once you have fulfilled your duty, we're referring to the salah, then Allah says, وَإِلَى رَبِّكَ فَارْغَبْ. Then turning to your Lord along with hope. All right, so once you finish the salah, then the verse implies that after you finish your salah, then this is the time to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make dua to Him. Imam Az-Zarqashi says, for this reason is legislated in the rain prayer to offer prayer, fasting, and charity before prayer. Right? This is one of the things that when there's a drought and the Imam is ordering people to perform the rain prayer, there will be a day assigned to come out for the rain prayer. But then the Imam will tell the people beforehand to fast, give charity, and offer extra salawat, and then come out to the prayer. All right? This is the sunnah of the rain prayer, which is that before the salat al-istisqa is to give charity, fast, offer voluntary prayers, and then come out to the salat for the salatul istisqa, the rain prayer. And then we have a hadith that Rasulullah says, there is no man who commits a sin, then stands for purification, then performs salah, then seeks forgiveness from Allah, except that Allah forgives him. And then he recited the ayah, those who, when they have committed fahisha or wronged themselves with evil, remember Allah until the end of the ayah. مَا مِن رَجُلٍ يذنب ذنبا ثم يقوم فيتطهر ثم يصلي ثم يستغفر الله إلا غفر الله له ثم قرأ هذه الآية والذين إذا فعلوا فاحشة أو ظلموا أنفسهم ذكروا الله فاستغفروا لذنوبهم. Right, so we notice the order here is that the person commits a sin, then they make purification. We already mentioned before, one of the previous etiquettes is to make wudu. Then performs salah. Performs the salah, we can assume here voluntary salah, and then seeks forgiveness, then makes the dua. Then Allah will, if a person does this, then Allah will forgive that person. And then Rasulullah read the verse in the Quran in which it talks about those who commit fahisha or wrong themselves, and then they remember Allah, dhakarullah, fastaghfaru li dhunubihim, and then they seek for forgiveness. So this is a general etiquette, which is that before you make dua, if you have the opportunity, proceed it with some good deeds, whether it is charity, whether it is performing salah, whether it's any other good deed, something that is done prior to making the dua. Etiquette number 27, making dua for parents and believers. So when you make dua, you should do it in this order. Make dua for yourself first, then your parents, and then your fellow believers, right? In that order. You should do it in that order. And we have numerous verses of the Quran, such as the verse, رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيَّ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْحِسَابِ. Right? Which translates, or our Lord, forgive me. Right? Start with yourself, my parents, and the believers on the day when the judgment will come to pass. And the verse, وَقُلْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. And be humble with them out of mercy, and pray, my Lord, be merciful to them. This is referring to the parents, as they raised me when I was young. And the verse, وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. And those who come after them will pray, our Lord, forgive us. Right, they start with themselves, and our fellow believers who preceded us in faith, and do not allow bitterness into our hearts towards those who believe. Our Lord, indeed, you are ever gracious, most merciful. And in hadith of Salama, when Abu Salama died, Rasulullah told her to make dua. He told her to say, قُولِي اللَّهُمَّ اغْفِرْ لِي وَلَهُ. Oh Allah, forgive me and him. So start with yourself, and then follow it up with your parents, and then the believers in general afterwards. Right? So this is the order that it should be done. Start with yourself first, make dua for yourself, then your parents, and then believers. Now, of course, the believers can also be divided. Those of us, who we have mashayikh and ulama we studied with, make dua for those who taught you, right? Your teachers, those who who did any favors for you, and then be as specific as possible, and then you can at the end be very general with the believers in general. All right, so dua for yourself, then your parents, then anybody, maybe you can do afterwards your immediate family, aunts, uncles, cousins, all right? Then your community, your teachers, and so on and so forth, and then afterwards the general body of Muslims. Okay, any questions? Sisters, any questions? Yeah.
Marry someone from like a non-Muslim family.
Mm.
But the wife converted, and somebody died with that family. Can you make a rule for them?
Okay, so you married a non-Muslim, you said?
Non-Muslim.
And somebody died from the non-Muslim. They died as a non-Muslim.
Yeah, but the non-Muslim converted to the marriage, right? But the rest of the family is not converted.
But who died?
All of our parents died.
Mm-hmm. And they died upon disbelief.
Right,
Yeah. So if anybody dies upon disbelief, we're not allowed to seek forgiveness for that person. Okay, this is a general rule that we're not allowed to seek forgiveness. ما كان للنبي والذين آمنوا أن يستغفروا للمشركين وَلَوْ كَانُوا أُولِي قُرْبَى. Allah says in the Quran that it is not for the Prophet ﷺ or the believers to seek forgiveness for the mushrikeen, those who died upon polytheism, even if they're close family. Even if they're close family. You can pray for guidance while they're alive. While they're alive, once they have departed this world, then it is not allowed to ask forgiveness. Yeah. Right. Yeah. The Prophet was, he initially wanted to make dua for his uncle, but he was then prevented from doing so. So this is, it's not allowed. Once a person dies upon disbelief, it is not allowed to make dua for them. Yeah. Exception. This is your only exception for the night. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, question is about reading Quran and making dua. This falls under what we mentioned before, which is good deeds. And try to do good deeds before making dua. This would fall under that category. All right, so we mentioned if you can pray salah before, nafil, if you can give sadaqah before, or any good deed, recitation of Quran before, all that is good, and then proceed into your dua. This also makes you into it makes you more connected as well. Rather than just coming straight into the dua, your heart is more connected now when you've performed some good deeds, especially recitation of Quran, and then heading into a dua afterwards. This is good, inshallah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, we had mentioned that dua earlier. Yeah, the hadith. Yes. Yes. Yes, you can make dua for these things because these things, blindness can be cured, right? It can be cured, and sickness can be cured. So you can make dua for these. The reason why Rasulullah told him to be patient is because that was better for him in terms of reward. So he had a choice. Rasulullah told him you have a choice. I can make dua for you, or you can be patient. Now, patience will require a little bit more extra effort, but in the hereafter it will be better. All right, in the hereafter it will be better. Or he can make dua for him to be cured. So the Rasulullah gave him the choice, but he also told him that, and there was also a woman, there was another hadith about a woman, she used to have seizures. And she came to the Prophet and she complained about the seizures. And he told her that either you can be patient, and you have the reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in hereafter, or I can make dua to remove it and cure you from it. And she said that, no, I can deal with it, but just make dua that I'm not uncovered when this happens, because she would become uncovered when this happened. So we can say that it might be better to be patient, but it depends on the person. Some people, if you tell them to be patient, then this won't be good for their iman. They won't be able to withstand it. So maybe it's better for them to make dua for shifa in that case. But somebody who's really sky high iman, and they can take these trials and tribulations and sicknesses, then we say to them, maybe it might be better for you to be patient and expect a reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rather than making the dua for removal of it. But it is permissible to make dua to remove sicknesses and diseases and so on. Allahu Akbar. Yeah. So should you ask a person whose dua is likely to be accepted, should you ask him dua? Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't mean that you don't make dua yourself, but you want to increase your pathways of Allah answering your du'as. You ask somebody who is traveling, somebody who's going to Hajj, Umrah, and so on. Somebody who's in a situation where their dua is going to be more likely to be answered, then you can ask them for dua. And we'll mention that coming up, the categories of people whose du'as are answered. All right, so this brings us to the next, all right, right on that point. Those whose dua, who are answered in their dua. Those who are answered in dua. Al-maqsusuna bistijabati dua. All right, so who are those whose du'as are answered? Now, when we say du'as are answered, meaning their du'as are more likely to be answered. It doesn't mean that if you don't have these, what we're going to mention, that your du'a will be rejected. All right, Allah can answer anybody's du'a, but there are certain people whose du'as are more likely to be answered than others. Or there are certain places where du'a is more likely to be answered than others. Or there are certain times where du'a is more likely to be answered than other times. It doesn't mean that outside of those times, or outside of those places, or outside of those people that their du'as are rejected, but it rather means that these people, or these times, or these places are more likely to be answered than others. All right, so it can be due to four matters. Either, coming back to the person, that person has a quality, due to a quality present in the one making the supplication. All right, that person has a specific quality that is making them more likely that their du'a will be answered. Or it has to do with the time in which the supplication is made, or due to the place in which the supplication is made, or due to the prestige of the dua itself. The dua itself, maybe it's a Quranic dua, it is a prophetic dua, it mentions Allah's names, His attributes. The prestige of the dua itself rises that the dua up and makes it more likely to be answered and accepted. So we will start with those whose du'as are answered due to a quality present. Right, accepted dua due to special qualities of the supplicator. Right, this category ما يرجع إلى صفات الداعي returns back to qualities of that person who are making the supplication that makes their dua more likely to be answered. The first category are people who are oppressed. Right, people who are oppressed, and there are specific hadith on this about the dua of the oppressed person being answered. Hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, ثلاث دعوات مستجابات لهن لا شك فيهن دعوة المظلوم ودعوة المسافر ودعوة الوالدين على الولد. Three supplications are answered without doubt. The supplication of the oppressed, the supplication of the traveler, and the supplication of the parent against the child. We'll mention these other two coming up. All right, but right now we're focused on the first quality mentioned here, which is the supplication of the oppressed, person who's been wronged. Right, they have been wronged. Somebody took their wealth, or somebody killed their family, or whatever the case is. They were oppressed or wronged in some way. Then that person, when they make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their dua is more likely to be answered. Why is that? Because they're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a form of desperation. Right, and that's one of the qualities that we mentioned of the etiquettes of dua, is that you have that type of desperation, right, and submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a person who's oppressed, they're in a desperate state, right? They're powerless, right? They have no one to turn to except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because of that desperation, that quality makes their dua more likely to be answered. In another hadith, the Rasulullah says that دعوة المظلوم مستجابة وإن كان فاجرا. The supplication of the oppressed is answered even if he is sinful. All right? So even if that person is sinful, all right? They're not a person who is practicing the religion the way they should be. The hadith mentioned that even then, their dua is still accepted. Because that person's sin is against himself, right? Whatever they do is between them and Allah, but that oppression that they went through is now between them and the person who oppressed them, and so therefore Allah will answer that supplication even if that person is sinful. And we also have a hadith of Anas, narrated by Ahmad, وَإِن كَانَ كَافِرًا. Even if this person is a disbeliever, some narration mentioned, even if they're a disbeliever, and they make dua and they're oppressed, then this dua can be answered. Yeah. Good question. Is this dua specifically the one that's answered, the dua of the oppressed answered, making against the person who oppressed them, or is it general? Or is it general? The hadith it seems to be general, Allahu A'lam, I don't know exactly. But there's also the hadith of Mu'adh, which we mentioned here, which also seems to suggest that it is more about the person oppressing. Right? The hadith of Ibn Abbas, the Prophet sent Mu'adh to Yemen, and he told Mu'adh, he warned Mu'adh, be afraid from the curse of the oppressed, as there is no screen between his invocation and Allah. It says, as if the Prophet is warning Mu'adh, be careful that they don't make dua against you. Right? So the hadith can hint that it's specifically talking about when they make dua against their oppressor, although it's not specified. So Allahu A'lam. But we can say for sure, against the one who oppressed them, that can be included. Now whether that extends to any dua they make, Allah knows best. Allah knows best. So this was when the Prophet sent Mu'adh to Yemen as a teacher and a ruler, and he gave him a number of advices, and one of the advices he gave him was that be careful about the dua of the oppressed, because now you're going to be in charge of people, and he was also collecting their zakat, and he also warned him about collecting the best of the wealth, the most when he would be collecting the livestock, he told him, be careful about collecting the best of their livestock. All right, don't collect like the best of the flock, but not the worst either. Right in between. And then he also said to him, be careful about the dua of the oppressed, because if you oppress people, if they make dua against you, then there's no screen between it and Allah. All right, there's no screen between it and Allah. اتقي دعوة المظلوم فإنها ليس بينها وبين الله حجاب. There is no hijab, there is no screen between Allah and the dua of the oppressed. So it seems to be suggesting that it is when a person makes dua against the oppressor, but Allahu A'lam could be more general as well. Yes. Yeah. Good. So the question is, who is the person who's being oppressed? Anybody who has their right taken away. Anybody who has their right taken away. So you have your wealth is your wealth. Somebody takes your wealth, you've been oppressed. Right? Somebody takes your property, you've been oppressed. Somebody backbites you, right? Then they've oppressed you. Anybody who's wronged you in any way. Right? This is a person, you've been oppressed if anybody wrongs you in any way. And if you wrong somebody else in any way, then you are an oppressor. Now, obviously, there's levels, right? A person who, backbites others, that's one level. Person who is, a head of state and slaughtering people and killing people and bombing people, that's also a higher level of oppression. But they're all levels of oppression. So oppression is any type of wrong. You wrong somebody, you take their right away, then you are an oppressor. And if somebody takes your right and wrongs you, then you have been oppressed. Allahu A'lam. All right, any other questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good. So the question is, people are making dua, they're oppressed. What is the time frame for the dua being answered? Only Allah knows that. Right? Only Allah knows when the dua will be answered. And this is not something we have control over. Allah chooses when He wants to answer the dua. All right? It's mentioned in the tafsir that Musa, when he made dua against Fir'aun, this dua was answered like 40 years later. Right? 40 years later, and then Allah answered the dua and He drowned Fir'aun and the army of Fir'aun. So it's not on our time frame. All right? It comes back to Allah's wisdom when He chooses to answer the dua. And if you just look at the situation in Gaza, people made dua. That dua was answered a year and a half later. Right? It took some time. Right? Or the situation happened in Syria, right, where the tyrant was removed after 13 years. Right? After 13 years of oppression, then he was removed. People were making dua for years. So there's no specific time frame that we can say that Allah will answer the dua, and maybe it might not even be answered in this life. Right? Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا يُؤَخِّرُهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ تَشْخَصُ فِيهِ الْأَبْصَارُ. Right? Allah says in the previous verse, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ اللَّهَ غَافِلًا عَمَّا يَعْمَلُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Don't think Allah is unaware of what the wrongdoers and the oppressors are doing. He's aware, but He is deferring that punishment on a day in which the eyes will be moving around out of terror. The eyes will be, blinking back and forth out of fear and terror. So maybe it might be the case that Allah does not answer the dua right away. It might take some time. It might take years, or maybe Allah might wait until Yawm al-Qiyamah to give that person their full punishment, and they might escape in this life. All right. So all of this comes back to Allah's divine wisdom. All right. And if you look at this hadith here, the next hadith, it also addresses that point. Hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he narrates that Rasulullah said, there are three whose supplication is not rejected: the fasting person when he breaks his fast, the just leader, and the supplication of the oppressed person. Allah raises it up above the clouds and opens the gates of heavens to it. And the Lord says, by my might I shall surely aid you, even if it should be after a while. All right, so the key point here is, you might have to wait. So we can't say, first people are making dua and then the answer is not coming, and then people start asking, well, when is the dua going to be answered? Allah knows best when He's going to answer the dua, and it can be soon, it can be not soon. It may take some time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why did you leave if you were being oppressed? Mm. Okay, good. So the question is, we find in the Quran that Allah will ask certain people oppressed on the Day of Judgment, why did you not migrate? Why didn't you leave the land? أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. Wasn't Allah's earth spacious and vast enough that you didn't have to remain in this place and be oppressed? And so the question is, where do we draw the line between a person enabling oppression upon themselves versus trying to get out of it if they can? Right? That's the question. It's a complicated question, and it really goes back to the situation. Each situation is different. So, but of course we say that if you can, you should not enable or allow yourself to be oppressed if you can avoid it. Right? If you know somebody's going to come and take your wealth and he's going to be in this location, don't go there. Right? If you can, avoid it. So you should not put yourself in a position where you will be oppressed. You try to avoid it as much as possible. But it might be unavoidable sometimes. Right? Such as the situation in Gaza. Where are they going to go? Right? There's there are barricades everywhere. Even the Muslim country that they share a border with is closed. Right? That border is the most secure border out of all the other borders. So where are they going to go? Right? So in certain situations you might not be able to leave. All right? But if there is an opportunity, a person is being oppressed, and there's an opportunity to get to leave or to avoid that oppression, then you try to do so as much as you can, if you're able to do so. Allahu Akbar. Any questions from the sisters? All right, moving on. Number 2, the person whose dua is more likely to be answered, the traveler. All right, with the condition that the travel is for permissible purpose. Right, somebody can't travel to steal or to plunder, and then they want to make dua because I'm a traveler. Right, it has to be for permissible purpose, and only then do we say that person's dua is accepted. And the wisdom behind this is that when you're traveling, right, you usually will be in a state of discomfort, difficulty, right? You're out of your comfort zone, and you might be more dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than you normally would be when you're in your home. The evidence for that is the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. The Prophet said, three supplications, we just mentioned this hadith, three supplications are answered without doubt: the supplication of the oppressed, the supplication of the traveler, and the supplication of the parent against the child. Now, we had also mentioned the hadith about the man who was disheveled and dusty, yutiru safara. He had traveled for a long period of time, and he spreads his hands out to the sky. يَمُدُّ يَدَيْهِ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ يَا رَبِّي يَا رَبِّي وَمَطْعَمُهُ حَرَامٌ وَمَشْرَبُهُ حَرَامٌ وَمَلْبَسُهُ حَرَامٌ وَغُذِّيَ بِالْحَرَامِ فَأَنَّى يُسْتَجَابُ لِذَلِكَ. How can his dua be answered? Even though he had the other etiquettes of dua in place. He raised his hands, he called out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was in a state of travel, but because his food and his drink and his nourishment was haram, this was a barrier for his dua to be accepted. But otherwise, if he didn't have these barriers, then his dua should have been accepted because he was a traveler. So traveling is one of the qualities, if they're found in a person, then it makes their dua more likely to be accepted. Quality number 3, the one who remembers Allah much. Hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ said, there are 3 whose supplication is not rejected: the one who remembers Allah much, the oppressed, and the just ruler. ثلاثة لا يرد الله دعاءهم الذاكر الله كثيرا والمظلوم والإمام المقسط. Another hadith, there are 3 whose supplication is not rejected: the one who remembers Allah, the oppressed until he is given victory, and the traveler until he returns. Number 4, the dua of the parent against the child. All right, once again, we mentioned this a while earlier. 3 supplications are answered without doubt: the supplication of the oppressed, the supplication of the traveler, and the supplication of the parent against the child. Now, this hadith, there are different narrations. One narration mentions the supplication of the parent for the child. Right? One narration mentions for the child, but most of the narrations seem to mention in this wording, which is the dua of the parent against the child. The scholars have mentioned that this also applies to the mother as well. The hadith mentions father specifically, though, right? It mentions the walid, right? The dua of the father. However, the scholars mentioned that the mother is also included. So this is when we translate the hadith, we say parent, even though the hadith literally mentions the father. The dua of the father against the child. The scholars have mentioned, though, that this is conditional, in that the parent is wronged and the child is disobedient. All right. Otherwise, this can lead to a parent. A parent is oppressive and they just make dua against the child, and this can be seen as kind of unfair, right? So scholars have mentioned that this is specifically when the parent has been wronged. But if the parent has not been wronged, there's nothing, the child didn't do anything wrong, and the parent just makes a dua against the child, then this is not included in the meaning of this hadith. So the scholars have mentioned that this is specifically when the parent was wronged, the child was disobedient, and as a result the parent made dua against the child, then that dua is accepted. But as for the parent, just because they don't like their child and they make dua against, then this is not included in the hadith. And of course, you should not make dua against your children, right? Parents, you should not make dua against your children, even if whatever they do, how disobedient or annoying or they're not listening. Do not make dua against your children. And this comes in the hadith of Jabir radiallahu anhu. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Do not invoke curses on yourself, or on your children, or on your possessions, lest you should happen to do it at a moment when supplications are accepted, and your prayer might be granted." All right. So sometimes a parent might get frustrated, and you make dua against your child. Don't do that, because it might be answered, and when it's answered, then you might be regretful. You might regret it. So do not make dua against your children. Even make dua for them, even if they're not listening or they're being disobedient. It's better to make dua for them, for Allah to reconcile them, rather than make dua against them. And this is better, because the dua of the parent against the child, as the hadith says, it is a dua that is accepted. All right, dua of the fasting person. As you see here, this is something we'll touch on in the pre-Ramadan lecture, as a way of saving some time and also deferring it to the pre-Ramadan lecture, which is on the 22nd of February. We have our pre-Ramadan Ramadan Ready lecture. Inshallah, everyone is invited on Saturday after Maghrib. We have dinner provided, so if everyone, inshallah, is invited to join the family lecture, pre-Ramadan lecture. We'll talk about the dua of the fasting person, the dua of Ramadan, as well, a bit more detail. So we'll say that for the family pre-Ramadan lecture. Number 6, relieving somebody in difficulty. Right? This is also a quality, that if a person has this quality of you relieve somebody in difficulty and distress, this will make your dua more likely to be accepted. Hadith of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, the Prophet says, whoever wants their dua to be answered and their distress to be removed, then let them relieve somebody in difficulty. من أراد أن تستجاب دعوته وأن تكشف كربته فليفرج عن معسر. Whoever wants their dua to be answered and their distress to be removed, let them relieve somebody in difficulty. And there's a long hadith in which Rasulullah says that if you relieve a believer from hardships in this life, Allah will relieve hardship on the day of the resurrection. If anyone makes it easy for a person who is indebted, who is in debt, and they find it difficult to repay, Allah will make it easy for them in this world and in the hereafter. And if anybody conceals the faults of another Muslim, Allah will conceal his faults in this world and in the hereafter. And Allah is in the aid of His servant. Wallahu fi aun al-abd ma kana al-abd fi auni akhihi. Allah helps His slave as long as the slave is helping his brother. So you make things easy for people, then Allah will make things easier for you. And if a person is in a stressful situation, a difficult situation, and you help them, then when your time comes to be in a difficult situation, Allah will help you and relieve you of your difficulty. All right, those performing Hajj and Umrah. Hadith of Abu Hurairah, the pilgrims performing Hajj and Umrah are a delegation to Allah. If they call upon Him, He will answer them, and if they ask for His forgiveness, He will forgive them. Al-Hujjaj wal-Ummar wafdullah in da'uhu ajabahum wa in istaghfaruhu ghafara lahum. The Hujjaj, those performing the Hajj, and those performing the pilgrimage, the Umrah pilgrimage, they are a delegation of Allah. If they call upon Him, He will answer them, and if they ask for His forgiveness, He will forgive them. Another narration, the version, the one who fights in the cause of Allah and the pilgrim performing Hajj and Umrah are a delegation to Allah. He invited them. So they responded to Him and they asked Him and He gives to them. So this is also from the categories of those who dua are more likely to be accepted. Anybody making dua, Umrah anytime soon? We can ask for dua. Anybody making Umrah? I know that some of my family is making Umrah. You making Umrah soon? In the summer, inshallah. So anybody making Umrah, inshallah, it's something good to ask them for their dua, because their dua is answered. Yes. Your Hajj? Good. So the question is, why is it that we find some people before they go to Hajj, they ask people's forgiveness or they repay any debts and so on? The reason usually, it might not apply as much today, but in the past, Hajj was very difficult. And it was a very good likelihood that when you left, you might not return home. Right? That if you left, you might not return home. Of course, it's become a lot easier now. But back in the days, you would leave and you would not be sure if you're coming back. So as a way of making sure that you're not leaving this world with any wrong done to anybody else or any debts owed, you clear those before you leave, due to the possibility that you might not return. Right? Of course, you should do this all the time, right? But when you're traveling, it becomes even more pertinent to do so because of that more likelihood that you might not return home. All right? But as I said, the modern day form of travel and luxury and so on, comfort, we expect to return home, but of course, Allah knows best. But you don't want to leave this world having owed anything to anybody or wronged anybody in any way without reconciling with them. So for this reason, people will ask forgiveness if they wronged anybody or attempt to settle any debts. Allahu Akbar. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, inshallah. So my parents are going for Umrah in a few weeks. So if anybody has any du'as for them, you can see them, inshallah, and prepare your list. All right, we'll stop here for tonight, inshallah, and continue. So we have a few more of the related to this first category of people whose du'as are answered due to characteristics present in them. We'll save that for our next session. If we have any other questions, we'll take those now, and then afterwards we will. So let's have a question here, then we'll see the sisters, and then come back up here. Yeah. So the question is, removing somebody from distress or difficulty, does it have to be something major, or can it be something simple as removing something harmful from the road? Would that qualify? Allahu A'lam. Of course, the more effort you place, and the more likelihood that will be, that this will be better for your du'a. But Allah also looks at the sincerity of your deeds as well. You might do something very small, but you're so sincere in it that sincerity rises it up, raises it up, right? As we saw in the hadiths about the woman who she gave water to a thirsty dog, right? What seemed to be a very small, insignificant act, but she did it with such sincerity that Allah forgave her sins. So it might not. We don't necessarily have to look at it in terms of something small or big, but look at it in terms of your sincerity and why you're doing it, and this can be the difference. Allah. All right, any questions from the sisters? Okay, come back to the brothers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good. Question is, making dua between the two khutbahs. Is there authentic hadith? So there is a hadith that there is a time in Friday where dua is accepted. And the scholars differed which time in Friday is that. And many of them have said that it is between the two, when the imam or the khatib sits after the khutbah, or in between the khutbahs, that time. They've said that's that time. And there are some hadiths that mention it. Or seem to indicate that. But it's not explicitly clear. It's not explicitly clear, but many of the scholars have said that is the time where the dua is accepted on Friday. There's a specific time on Friday where dua is accepted. The Prophet did not specify exactly when that time is, and so there was a number of different views, but the two main views was that it is either when the khatib sits until the salah is finished, or it is after Salatul Asr. After Salatul Asr until the sun sets. Those are the two most authentic views of when that special time in Friday is. All right, any other questions? Yes. Non-Muslim? Is there any dua that we can make for a deceased that's non-Muslim? We cannot ask for their forgiveness. And that's really the only thing that can benefit them when they have left this world. So on that, along that way of thinking, I don't know any specific dua that can be made if they've left this world as non-Muslims. All right. Possibly, you don't want to get into also the issue of punishment and maybe asking for decrease of punishment. I mean, maybe somebody can say that, but we don't want to. Because we don't know what Allah has in store for that person to begin with. But definitely we cannot ask for forgiveness for that person if they were known to die upon disbelief. And that's really the only thing that can benefit them once they have left this world. All right? So once again, right, the condition for any deed to be accepted is Islam. Right? Islam is the condition for any deed to be accepted in the hereafter. And there are several verses on that in which the Quran indicates that. So the prerequisite for deeds is that it needs to be done with faith, iman. And if it's not done with iman, then this is not something. They might receive the rewards for it in this life. In this life, they can receive rewards for good deeds they do, non-Muslims. But the reward in the next life is conditional upon faith, upon belief. So we can't ask for forgiveness, and we can't ask for their deeds to be accepted, because the deeds, in order for them to be accepted, it needs to be on the condition that they had iman. Wallahu a'lam.
Somebody asked us if they can move with the deceased mother who was a Muslim. And I got so upset. After that, I wouldn't know how to do
Okay.
it. After that, they're upset.
Or they wanted you to make it.
Because I was living as a next to them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just coming back to the verse we mentioned earlier, right? When Rasulullah wanted to make dua for his uncle, Abu Talib, who was like his father. Right? Abu Talib was like the father of the Prophet ﷺ, and he loved him just like he loved his father. And when Abu Talib was on his deathbed, Rasulullah was trying his hardest, telling his uncle, "Oh uncle, say La ilaha illallah. At least say it, even if you don't believe it, just say it, so that I can argue with it in front of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala." But his uncle did not. He did not utter those words, and so Rasulullah was prohibited from seeking forgiveness, even if, and the verse mentions, even if they are close family. وَلَوْ كَانُوا أُولِي قُرْبَى. Even if they're close family, we cannot do so. So in a situation like this, we just say that Allah knows best. It is Allah's wisdom that He has prohibited us from doing so, and we leave it up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah.
Just for clarity, follow-up question. I'm assuming there's no difference between someone who is not versus a fire worshiper, right?
Yeah, so the question is there any difference between a person who is a fire worshiper, a polytheist, idol worshiper, versus a Christian or Jew? There's no difference, right? Once a person is a disbeliever, then this apply for any disbeliever, because Islam is the only religion accepted, as is clear in the Quran. Inna Deen 'inda Allah is Islam. Right? The religion in the sight of Allah is Islam. وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ. Whoever seeks a religion other than the religion of Islam, it will never be accepted from that person. Now, we can say that there, certain people, disbelievers, they died upon disbelief. Maybe the message never reached them. Maybe the message did not reach them in a coherent manner. Maybe they did not hear the message properly. It came to them in a distorted manner. We leave that up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will judge them. Right? Allah will judge them. But for us, we judge upon what is apparent. But it is possible that there might be people who the message never reached them. Right? The message never reached them, or reached them in a distorted manner, to the point where they were not able to give make a proper decision on accepting or rejecting the religion. Then we say that Allah will judge those people on the day of judgment. They're in Allah's judgment on the day of judgment. Yeah, same thing. Same thing. The only religion accepted is Islam, and anything else is disbelief. Although we can say that those religions might be closer, they have a higher status because they have a divinely revealed book. But at the end of the day, the only religion accepted is Islam. All right. Any questions from the sisters? If a person commits suicide, can you make dua for them if they're Muslim? Yes. All right. The only time you cannot make dua for somebody is if they died upon disbelief. Anybody who has done any sin, you can make dua for any sinful Muslim. All right. Even if they have committed suicide or done any other action, once they're still a Muslim, you can make dua for them and ask for their forgiveness. Allahu Akbar. All right, last question.
What is a comment? If you compare Muslims to, say, Christians clasp their hand, Muslims own their hand. And when I was back in Guyana, that time, Hindu, and then you guys saw us raising our hands, it seemed begging for rights. Right? So they don't actually raise their hand like this, they're actually
Right, and that's what we said earlier, that it is the position of the beggar, or the way in which a beggar would ask, which is hands outstretched, inner palms to the sky. And that's exactly, the reason, the wisdom behind it, is that it is a portrayal of desperation, right? And desperation towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu a'lam, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Sayyidina Muhammad, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, subhanaka wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.